The box wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 eyes. It sat in the center of Daniel's apartment floor, no return label, no handwritten name, just a black matte surface, still and silent, as if it had been placed there with care and intention. He stood over it for a long time, long enough for the air in the room to feel different, not colder, not warmer, just waiting. Every instinct told him to leave it sealed. But instinct has a way of losing to curiosity, so he knelt, slid his fingers under the lid, and lifted. Inside, perfectly folded as though ironed by steady hands, was the dress, deep blood red, the one she wore when she walked back into the church, the one that stopped the music, the one that turned an aisle into a witness stand. The fabric still held its shape, its folds undisturbed. But it wasn't just the color that froze him. It was the thing tucked underneath. A newspaper clipping. The headline didn't matter. It was the photograph that did. It was him, standing between the priest and the altar, just moments before the screen lit up for the world to see. His face caught mid-expression. Not guilty, not shocked. Something in between. Something no one could ever explain away. Daniel's throat tightened, not because he didn't know who sent it, but because he did. He set the box down slowly, as though it might detonate. And in the quiet, the truth pressed in around him. She hadn't finished. Not that day. Not yet. The box stayed where it was. Daniel circled it once, as if distance could change what he had seen inside. But nothing in that room would ever look the same again. He didn't touch it again that night. He didn't throw it away either. It sat there, silent, patient, unblinking, like it knew he couldn't bring himself to remove it. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. The city kept moving. But inside that apartment, time stalled. The newspaper clipping lay on the coffee table now, the edges curling slightly from the heat of his hands. It wasn't just a photograph. It was a mirror. It was proof. And it was a reminder that truth doesn't fade just because the witnesses have gone home. He poured himself a drink, but didn't swallow it. It just sat in the glass, untouched, catching the faint light from the window. On the floor, a single thread from the red dress had come loose, coiling against the black velvet lining of the box. He thought about picking it up. He didn't. Instead, he sat in the dark, remembering the way she had walked back into that church, how the air changed, how the whispers rippled through the congregation. And now, she had sent the dress back. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was a message. It meant, I can reach you any time I want. The next morning, the box was still there. But something had changed. It wasn't just the dress anymore. There was an envelope on top of it now, black, unmarked, thin enough to feel fragile, but heavy enough to carry dread. He tore it open. Inside, a single photograph. Not from the wedding, not from the bathroom. This was taken later, nighttime. The church, locked, lights out. And in the shadow by the side door, her silhouette. No face. Just the unmistakable outline of the red dress. As if she'd been there, waiting, while he was somewhere else trying to forget. There was no note, no threat, only the image. He dropped it back into the envelope, but the shape of it in his hand didn't change. Once you hold proof, your fingers remember the weight. That same day, inside the cathedral, the cleaning woman was at work. She had been there for years, seen weddings, funerals, baptisms, all the moments where people pretended walls couldn't hear. The pews were empty now. Dust clung to the rails where guests had once gripped them in prayer. The scent of lilies still lingered faintly. Or maybe it was just her imagination. She mopped in slow, deliberate strokes. That's when she saw it. Faint, nearly gone, but still there. A trail of dark red smudges along the marble aisle. They started at the altar, stretched halfway down the center, and disappeared beneath the projection screen, She knelt, pressing her gloved hand against the faint stains. Not wine, not wax, something else. Under the pulpit, wedged against the base, she spotted a glint of silver. She reached for it, pulling out a small cross earring, bent at the middle as if it had been torn away in haste. She stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her pocket. Her lips moved, barely above a whisper. God sees everything. Then she stood, gripped the mop, and kept cleaning, as if she hadn't just picked up a fragment of a story the world wasn't ready to hear. The church was closed by the time he arrived. The lock on the side door had been broken for years. No one fixed it. Maybe no one wanted to. He slipped inside without sound. No cane, no heavy steps, just the slow, steady shuffle of a man who knew this building better than most. The air inside was cold, but not the kind of cold that makes you shiver. This was the kind that settled into your lungs and stayed there. He walked past the empty pews, the flickering red sanctuary lamp, the altar where he had once knelt as a boy. His hand brushed against the wood of the confessional booth, a habit from decades ago. He stepped inside, not to speak to a priest, not tonight. The other side was empty. He didn't need a response. He needed the walls to listen. I saw what you did, Abraham. His voice was rough, scraped raw by time, not angry, not even trembling, just heavy. I saw it back in '89 with the choir boy. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that it was none of my business. He took a deep, uneven breath. Then I saw it again, last year. A different boy. Same. Look in your eyes. The confession booth felt smaller now. When I saw her wedding announcement, and saw your name as the officiant, I knew something would happen. I just didn't know how. He reached into his coat, pulled out a black envelope, set it gently on the seat beside him. This has everything. Names, places, dates. If I don't wake up tomorrow, maybe someone else will finally tell the truth. He sat there for a long time after that, not moving, not praying. Then he stood, stepped out into the empty nave, and walked toward the side door. Outside, the night swallowed him whole, but his shadow didn't follow. So small, most people missed it. One Sunday morning, Mass moved as it always had. Hymns, readings, the slow rhythm of ritual. Father Abraham stood at the altar, voice even, hands steady. If the scandal weighed on him, he didn't show it. But halfway through communion, in the third pew on the left, a mother stayed seated. Her hands clenched a rosary in her lap. She didn't look at the altar, didn't look at the host. Her eyes were fixed forward, locked on some point past the priest's head. When the usher reached her row, she shook her head. The man hesitated, whispered something. She didn't answer. She just mouthed two words. Words the people beside her would never forget. Not him. The usher moved on. The silence stayed. 2 days later, it happened again. Not in the main church this time, but in the basement hall during confirmation class. Father Abraham was running through the catechism with a small group of children, their notebooks open, pencils scratching. The smell of instant coffee and paper filled the room. The door swung open. A mother stepped inside. No knock, no apology. She crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her son's workbook, and pulled him up by the arm. "We're leaving," she said, not to him, but to the priest. Her voice cracked on the last word, not from weakness, from rage held too long. "You won't teach him." The boy looked confused, clutching the pages as his mother led him away. The rest of the class sat frozen, pencils hovering above half-written sentences. Father Abraham didn't move, didn't call after them. The door closed behind her. By the end of the month, 5 more families were gone. Choir rehearsals were canceled until further notice. The collection baskets came back lighter every Sunday. The church still stood, but the sound inside had changed. It was no longer the echo of prayer. It was the sound of absence, and everyone knew who had started it. A woman in a blood-red dress who hadn't spoken a word, but had somehow said everything. The front steps of the church had never been this crowded. They weren't filled with parishioners now, or with family waiting for photographs. They were filled with strangers, reporters, photographers, cameramen holding lenses like weapons, their eyes sharp, their patience thinner than the winter air. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, just behind the heavy wooden doors, listening to the noise on the other side. It wasn't music. It wasn't laughter. It was a low hum of voices, questions being sharpened before they were thrown. He stepped out. The hum turned into a roar. Flashes burst against his face before his shoes met the top step. Microphones pushed forward. Questions collided over each other. Is it true? Were you in the bathroom with him? Do you have anything to say to the bride? He said nothing, kept his eyes down. But silence in moments like this doesn't protect. It confirms. One reporter called his name with a laugh, like they already knew the punchline. Another asked if he planned to resign from his job. A third, younger than the rest, just stared at him. Not with disgust, not with pity, but with the kind of look that meant, I hope someone's recording this. He tried to move past them, down the steps, toward the street. But they closed in, bodies pressing together, blocking his path. He reached the curb, only to find a second wall of cameras waiting. The car that was meant to take him away was trapped in a circle of people holding phones high, recording his every breath. He didn't speak, didn't look up. He just kept moving, one slow step at a time, as if there was somewhere left for him to go. But the truth followed. In every flash, in every frame, in every headline already being written before he even reached the door handle of the car. He didn't leave in daylight. No one saw him pack. No one saw him sign anything. There was no farewell mass, no formal transfer notice pinned to the bulletin board in the vestibule. But one man, the night guard, said he heard it. A soft thud of suitcase wheels on stone, the scrape of the rectory door unlocking, and then the slow, measured steps of someone who knew the building better than anyone else. 2 suitcases, 1 small black duffel. The collar was still around his neck, even in the dark. The guard said he wanted to speak, to ask where he was going, but the words never came. Something in the way the priest carried himself made the question feel unsafe. Father Abraham didn't look back. He didn't pause at the edge of the church grounds. He walked into the night, disappearing past the last lamppost, until his shape dissolved into the black. By morning, his office was stripped bare. No vestments in the wardrobe, no photographs on the desk. The drawers held nothing but dust. The parish secretary said he'd been reassigned, but when pressed, she couldn't, or wouldn't, name the parish. Rumors moved quickly. Some said he'd gone to a rural chapel far from the city. Others swore he'd been seen in plain clothes in a bus station 2 counties over. One claimed he'd been given a new name, but the one rumor that seemed to stick, that he hadn't gone anywhere to serve. He'd gone somewhere to hide. She was gone before anyone realized she had left. No posts, no statements, no television interviews. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her apartment door stayed locked. The blind stayed drawn. For a while, people thought she'd left the city entirely, maybe the country. Some believed she had gone to stay with family. Others thought she wanted the attention to fade before she returned. But then, someone saw her. It wasn't in a cafe or a market. It wasn't even in the part of town she once called home. It was in the cemetery. The florist across the road said she was carrying lilies, white, fresh, wrapped in paper. She walked slowly between the rows, stopping at one grave, then another. No one knew who they belonged to. The florist only remembered the way she stood there, as if she was listening. She didn't cry. She didn't kneel. She just placed the lilies down, smoothed the petals with one hand, and turned to leave. The sky was heavy that day, the air still, the kind of weather that made every sound sharper. Her footsteps on the gravel seemed louder than they should have been. When she reached the gates, she glanced back once, not at the flowers, not at the stone, but at the path she had walked to get there. And then she was gone again. By the next morning, the lilies were gone too. No footsteps on the gravel outside, no knock at the rectory door, just an envelope, black, thin, resting alone in the church mailbox. The parish secretary found it. She almost threw it out, thinking it was empty, but the paper had weight to it, the kind of weight you don't ignore. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It wasn't of the wedding. It wasn't of the reception that never happened. It was of a door, the bathroom door, the same one Elana had opened that day. It was taken from the hallway, just far enough to make the gap in the door visible, the shadows inside stretching toward the frame. You couldn't see faces. You couldn't see movement. But the suggestion was enough to make the secretary's stomach turn. On the back, written in clean block letters, "You never saw what came in after me." There was no signature, but it didn't need one. Everyone who touched that envelope knew exactly whose hands had sent it. The envelope stayed on the secretary's desk all night. No one filed it. No one locked it away. No one dared throw it out. By morning, it was gone. No one saw who took it. No one admitted to touching it. But the photograph, that stayed, not in the mailbox, not on a desk, but in the minds of everyone who had seen it. What came in after her? Was it someone? Something? Or had the bathroom door become the threshold to a truth even she hadn't expected? The wedding had been months ago. The guests had gone home. The flowers had rotted. The music had long stopped. But the story wasn't done. And wherever she was now, Elana still had the dress, and she still had the silence to use it again. If you think this is where it ends, you're wrong. When someone can reach you without you seeing them come or go, you're never out of their sight. Subscribe now, because if you wait for part 3 to find you, it might already be too late. And if you're watching this and still won't subscribe, go to the comments, tell us why. We'll be reading. She will too.